Cassie's testimony may have ended, but what came next left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. What was supposed to be a routine cross-examination exploded into something far more disturbing, a relentless barrage of explicit messages, violent flashbacks, and audio that painted a chilling portrait of power, abuse, and manipulation behind closed doors. As the prosecution and defense clashed, one thing became crystal clear. This trial is no longer just about reputation. It's about reckoning. From secret tapes and threats of exposure to violent episodes tied to freak-offs, drug use, and explosive jealousy, Day 5 unearthed layers of darkness that have long been buried beneath luxury, fame, and carefully crafted public images. Cassie's final words on the stand, combined with the shocking testimony of a former escort and a longtime Diddy associate, have cracked open the truth behind one of music's most influential moguls. And as investigators revealed what they found inside Diddy's hotel room, the chaos only deepened. This isn't gossip. It's a legal and emotional bombshell that's shaking the very foundation of hip-hop royalty. So grab your seat, because we're unpacking every disturbing detail from Day 5 of the Diddy trial. From Cassie's emotional breakdown to damning evidence and unexpected witnesses, this video pulls no punches. Hit that like button, subscribe for part 6, and stay tuned until the very end, because the story isn't just messy, it's historic. Before the jury even entered the room, Day 5 of Diddy's trial kicked off with tension thick in the air. The prosecution had had enough. After 4 intense days of cross-examination, they formally requested that the judge put a hard stop to the defense's questioning of Cassie Ventura by 4:30 p.m. Their reasoning wasn't just strategic, it was human. Cassie, now 8.5 months pregnant, was enduring relentless interrogation that prosecutors described as unnecessary, repetitive, and potentially harassing. The judge didn't mince words. He sided with the prosecution and warned both legal teams that the court wouldn't tolerate disorganization or delay tactics. With a packed courtroom and national attention zeroed in, the judge made it clear. This trial would proceed with structure and urgency. Cassie had already spent 4 grueling days recounting traumatic moments from her 11-year relationship with Diddy. Today would be her final stand. But it wasn't just about Cassie's pregnancy. The prosecution's move highlighted something deeper. A growing frustration over the defense's strategy to poke holes in Cassie's credibility by overwhelming her with texts, voice memos, and out-of-context timelines. Many of their questions circled the same topics, hoping to confuse or discredit her by exploiting inconsistencies, some of which stemmed from years of alleged trauma and substance use. Prosecutors argued that dragging out her testimony any longer wasn't about justice. It was about exhaustion. Behind the scenes, this legal maneuver was also strategic. By limiting the defense's time, the government ensured that Cassie's final words on the stand wouldn't be buried in legal noise or dragged out over multiple days. It gave them control over the narrative's closure, ending her testimony on their terms, with dignity intact. For a witness who had just relived years of physical, emotional, and psychological abuse under oath, that control was everything. As the court prepared to move forward, one thing was certain. Day 5 wouldn't just be about Cassie's endurance. It would mark the beginning of a turning point. The prosecution was no longer reacting. They were striking back, tightening their grip on the narrative, and setting the stage for the bombshells still to come. What happened next would shatter any illusion that this was just another celebrity trial. This was about to get darker, louder, and far more dangerous. The courtroom fell silent as the defense brought the focus back to one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in this trial: the 2016 Intercontinental Hotel surveillance footage. The video, already seen by many online, allegedly shows Sean "Diddy" Combs violently attacking Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway. But this time, the footage wasn't just a visual. It was being dissected in open court, with the defense aiming to flip the narrative completely. Rather than deny what the video showed, Diddy's legal team leaned into it, with a twist. They claimed Diddy wasn't in control of his actions. According to them, what the public saw wasn't a violent man abusing his partner, but a troubled individual suffering from addiction and experiencing a blackout triggered by drug withdrawals. It was a risky angle, one that placed Diddy in the role of a man battling demons rather than committing calculated abuse. To support their argument, the defense presented a string of voice messages and text conversations between Diddy and Cassie around the time of the hotel incident. Some of these messages showed intimacy, affection, and even flirtation, elements the defense used to question whether the relationship was as one-sided and abusive as Cassie claimed. Their goal was clear: introduce doubt, paint complexity, and muddy the timeline of events. But when Cassie took the stand to respond, she didn't hesitate. She confirmed that while their relationship may have had moments of affection, they were part of a larger cycle of manipulation. According to her, after each violent episode, Diddy would flood her with gifts, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, trips, and promises that things would change. But they never did. The gifts weren't love, they were hush money. A way to cover up bruises with luxury and keep her tethered through power and control. Even more chilling were Cassie's statements about coercion and blackmail. She testified that Diddy had threatened to release intimate videos if she didn't comply with his demands. In one instance, after she tried to leave him, he allegedly played a video of her with an escort and said he would leak it if she didn't agree to a sexual encounter that same night. These weren't isolated moments. They were patterns, calculated, repeated, and devastating. The prosecution echoed this point, framing Diddy's behavior as a textbook example of manipulation. Not just emotional abuse, but psychological warfare. A constant cycle of trauma, apology, and power plays. And while the defense tried to paint Cassie as a willing participant, her testimony suggested otherwise. She described feeling trapped, confused, and afraid, not just of what Diddy might do to her, but of what the world might say if she spoke out. And yet, here she was, 8.5 months pregnant, reliving it all in a courtroom packed with strangers and media. Her willingness to confront the darkest moments of her past didn't just add credibility, it added weight. Cassie wasn't just a witness, she was evidence. And as her words echoed through the room, it became clear. The hotel video was just the beginning. The real story? It was far more disturbing than anyone imagined. Just when the courtroom seemed to be settling into routine cross-examinations, everything changed. A voice recording was played, one that came not from a celebrity, lawyer, or journalist, but from a man most people had never heard of. His name? Jonathan Audi. And what he had to say would leave the entire courtroom stunned. Jonathan Audi is a former male escort, but his testimony wasn't about a single encounter or vague memory. It was detailed, graphic, and horrifying. He claimed that over a period of time, he was hired repeatedly by Sean Diddy Combs, not just to perform, but to engage in sex acts with Cassie while Diddy sat in the corner watching. According to Audi, the acts took place in luxury hotel rooms, under specific lighting conditions, with Diddy allegedly giving verbal instructions throughout. The details got even darker. Audi said he was often asked to dress up in costumes, most notably as a police officer, and was offered increasingly large sums of money to fulfill specific fantasies. But behind the glamour, he described a disturbing environment. He said Cassie often appeared intoxicated, dazed, or unconscious. On more than one occasion, he feared she wouldn't wake up. That's when he decided to take matters into his own hands, by secretly recording the encounters. The recording, according to Audi, wasn't meant for blackmail or revenge. It was a form of protection. He feared that if something went wrong, if Cassie died or if authorities got involved, he would be blamed. So, he hid a small spy camera inside a hotel water bottle and captured everything. In that footage, he claims, Diddy can be heard giving directions while Cassie lay unresponsive. Whether the footage itself will be admitted into evidence is still unclear, but the description alone was enough to rattle everyone present. What made this moment even more damning was how closely Audi's timeline aligned with years of whispers and online speculation about Diddy's private behavior. Rumors about sex parties, escorts, and drug-fueled freak-offs had followed him for years, but they had never been laid out like this under oath in federal court. Audi's account wasn't just another salacious story, it was part of a growing body of testimony that painted a consistent and chilling picture. Even more concerning were Audi's claims that he warned Diddy he had footage of their encounters. According to Audi, Diddy responded not with panic, but with intimidation. He allegedly received veiled threats, including a disturbing encounter at a settlement meeting where Diddy wore a t-shirt showing two masked men pointing guns. Audi took it as a message: stay quiet or face the consequences. Despite the fear, Audi eventually went public, and now he's a pivotal part of the government's case. For the jury, this wasn't just another witness. It was an outsider, someone with no fame, no fortune, and nothing to gain. And yet, his story echoed everything Cassie had been testifying to for days: manipulation, silence, and survival. Whether the court accepts all of Audi's testimony remains to be seen. But in that moment, the courtroom realized something bigger. This case wasn't just about Cassie. It was about a system of exploitation that may have gone unchecked for far too long. If the court had any lingering doubts about the imbalance of power in Cassie and Diddy's relationship, the next wave of evidence erased them. Through a series of disturbing text exchanges and testimony, jurors were pulled deeper into a world where control was currency, and Cassie was constantly walking a tightrope between survival and submission. The focus? The now infamous freak-offs, jealousy-fueled violence, and a pattern of psychological games designed to dominate. Cassie testified that she often felt unsafe saying no to Diddy's sexual demands, especially when it came to freak-offs, what she described as orchestrated, drug-fueled group sex encounters. The messages entered into evidence revealed her growing discomfort with these situations. In one thread from 2010, she hinted at wanting to stop, only to be met with sarcastic dismissals and emotionally manipulative replies like, "You're so predictable." Her fear wasn't unfounded. When Cassie tried to assert boundaries, Diddy retaliated, not just emotionally but physically. One incident stood out. Cassie recalled being in a car with Diddy when he accused her of having an affair with an NFL player. Enraged, he allegedly snatched her phone out of her hand and sprinted down Wilshire Boulevard in the middle of traffic. According to Cassie, he then disappeared with the phone for hours, leaving her alone, panicked, and without any way to contact help. When she returned home, her mother was so concerned that she called the police. It wasn't a one-off. Other messages and courtroom exchanges detailed additional outbursts. Diddy allegedly took Cassie's car, her passport, and at times left her isolated with no access to essentials. This wasn't just possessiveness. It was strategic isolation. According to prosecutors, these tactics were meant to destabilize Cassie, making her more compliant and dependent on Diddy's approval and resources. The courtroom also learned that Diddy's jealousy wasn't limited to anonymous athletes. During cross-examination, the defense referenced an incident involving Chris Brown, where Diddy allegedly accused Cassie of dancing too closely with him at a party. The prosecution used this as further evidence of Diddy's possessiveness spiraling into paranoia. Whether it was imagined betrayal or real flirtation didn't matter. Any perceived threat to his dominance triggered a reaction. Despite all of this, Cassie was expected to maintain appearances. While she attended events like the Met Gala and music video shoots with a forced smile, her private world was collapsing. Behind the glitz and the designer gowns was a woman battling daily manipulation. In her own words, she said she began to lose herself, emotionally and artistically. Even her music was controlled. Diddy reportedly dictated the style, lyrics, and themes of her songs, ensuring her voice never strayed far from his agenda. By the end of this section of her testimony, Cassie made one thing clear. She wasn't just a partner in a toxic relationship. She was a prisoner in plain sight. Her life wasn't defined by love. It was ruled by power plays, surveillance, and a constant fear that saying the wrong thing, or saying no, could cost her everything. And as the jury looked over the messages and heard the testimonies, the illusion of a glamorous fairy tale romance was officially shattered. The courtroom had seen tension, shock, and outrage, but what came next hit like a gut punch. For 4 days, Cassie Ventura had kept her composure through hours of cross-examination, but when the prosecution asked a simple, devastating question, "Did he beat you during freak-offs?" her voice cracked. The tears came quickly. Her answer? Yes. That single word carried the weight of over a decade of silence. Cassie's emotional collapse wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was the breaking point of a woman who, for years, had been forced to live behind a mask. She testified that she had said no to freak-offs more than once. But the backlash she faced, from verbal assaults to physical violence, made it clear that refusal wasn't an option. Her testimony revealed that freak-offs weren't consensual events. They were obligations, traps disguised as intimacy, a sick form of control. What made this testimony even more disturbing was how calculated the abuse appeared to be. Cassie described how Diddy would stage elaborate makeup sessions after violent episodes, gift-giving sprees, luxurious getaways, and long text threads begging for forgiveness. It was a cycle: assault, apology, manipulation, over and over, for years. She said it took her a long time to even recognize that what she endured wasn't love. It was control disguised as affection. When asked why she never left sooner, Cassie admitted the answer was complex. She feared losing her career. She feared retaliation. She feared what Diddy might do if she ever spoke out. And she feared what the world might say, how the media would spin it, how the fans might turn on her. She had watched other women in the industry be torn apart for telling the truth. She didn't want to be next. But everything changed when she found out she was pregnant. In her words, that moment gave her clarity. "I realized I couldn't bring a child into this world while still carrying so much fear," she said, and that fear, she explained, began to turn into resolve. She filed her lawsuit. She stepped into court. And now she's using her voice to reclaim what she says was stolen from her for over a decade. Shortly after her breakdown on the stand, Cassie released a statement through her attorney, Douglas Wigdor. She called the trial week empowering and healing, adding, "For me, the more I heal, the more I remember. And the more I remember, the more I will never forget." She thanked her supporters and asked for privacy as she prepares to welcome her child. But her message was clear. This was more than testimony. It was transformation. To keep the momentum from slowing, the prosecution shifted gears after Cassie's emotional testimony by introducing a new thread: Cassie's canceled tour. Leading up to the lawsuit, she had reportedly been planning a multi-city comeback. But after reliving years of trauma and taking legal action, she canceled the tour entirely. The prosecution used this to highlight the real-life cost of Cassie's decision to speak out. It wasn't just headlines. There were financial, emotional, and professional consequences. Cassie's breakdown marked the emotional center of this case. Proof that behind the legal jargon and digital evidence was a woman still recovering from the invisible scars of manipulation, coercion, and fear. It reminded the jury and the world that this trial isn't just about celebrity scandal. It's about how power protects predators and silences survivors. And in that moment on the stand, with tears in her eyes and a baby on the way, Cassie made one thing clear: silence is no longer an option. Just when the courtroom appeared to be winding down from the emotional intensity of Cassie's final testimony, a new voice jolted the room back to full attention. The prosecution called its next witness, Don Rashard. Though his name wasn't splashed across headlines like Cassie's, what he was about to say would send a chill through the entire courtroom. He wasn't a fan, a friend, or a distant observer. He was an insider, a former member of Diddy's team who had seen it all. Don Rashard worked with Diddy from 2004 to 2011. During that time, he said, he was more than just an employee, he was a witness. And what he witnessed, he claimed, was abuse happening in real time. Rashard testified that in 2009, while at Diddy's Los Angeles home during a music recording session, he saw the music mogul fly into a rage over something as trivial as breakfast. What started as an argument quickly turned violent. According to Rashard, Diddy grabbed a hot skillet filled with eggs and swung it at Cassie's head. She collapsed, falling into a fetal position to protect herself. But the violence didn't stop there. Rashard said Diddy then kicked Cassie repeatedly in the head and body before dragging her up a staircase by her hair, smashing glass along the way. The room fell silent as Rashard recounted the brutality, his voice steady, but the weight of the memory clear. Rashard admitted he didn't intervene. He didn't call the police. When asked why, his answer was simple: fear. The next day, Diddy allegedly told him, "It would be better if we don't talk. People could go missing." It wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. And it worked. Rashard stayed silent for years, until now. But Rashard's testimony didn't stop at one incident. He claimed this wasn't a rare outburst. It was part of a long-standing pattern of behavior. Rashard said he often saw Diddy throw objects at Cassie, curse at her in front of others, and belittle her during studio sessions. The private image of a glamorous music power couple began to disintegrate under the weight of Rashard's first-hand accounts. What made Rashard's testimony even more compelling was how closely it mirrored Cassie's own recollections. Without seeing her messages or hearing her recent interviews, Rashard described the same manipulation, the same explosions of violence, and the same eerie calm that followed each outburst. His timeline aligned with hers, 2009, 2010, and beyond. Their stories, told from opposite ends of the power structure, pointed to the same disturbing truth. To add context to Rashard's claims, prosecutors introduced internal emails and calendar logs from Diddy's staff that placed all parties at the LA property during the alleged incident. They also referenced Rashard's earlier lawsuit against Diddy, filed years ago, which alleged a toxic workplace and referenced several violent episodes. That lawsuit didn't get much media traction back then, but now it's being used to establish a pattern. To keep the narrative moving and avoid emotional fatigue, the prosecution then introduced a new detail: Cassie's access to the music industry while dating Diddy. In an attempt to downplay her accusations, the defense had previously argued that she benefited from their relationship. But under redirect, it was made clear that those opportunities often came with strings attached. Studio sessions arranged only after freak-offs, collaborations promised only after submission. According to both Cassie and Rashard, nothing was freely given. Rashard also testified about the fear that Diddy instilled in his inner circle. He said that employees had a code. They didn't question, they didn't intervene, and they never spoke out. The house was monitored, the staff was rotated, and no one stayed too long. Those who got too close were pushed out. Those who asked questions were reminded, subtly or otherwise, that Diddy wasn't just a boss, he was untouchable. By the time Rashard stepped down from the witness stand, the energy in the courtroom had shifted once again. Cassie's claims were no longer just personal, they were corroborated. And for the jury, that changed everything. Because when two people from opposite sides of a billion-dollar empire tell the same chilling story, it raises a question louder than any headline. What else has been buried, and who else is still too afraid to speak? As if the emotional testimony and witness bombshells weren't enough, federal agents took the stand next, and what they revealed peeled back another layer of Diddy's carefully crafted public persona. This time, the courtroom shifted from past abuse to physical evidence. And what investigators found inside Diddy's luxury hotel suite was straight out of a crime drama. The hotel room wasn't just a place to sleep. According to Homeland Security agents, it was set up for something far more elaborate. There, in a swanky high-rise suite, they found nearly $9,000 in cash, bottles of Astroglide and baby oil stacked in drawers, and specialized lighting equipment described by the prosecution as mood-setting devices. But the most unsettling discovery came from the medicine cabinet. Inside a black Louis Vuitton bag, agents discovered prescription bottles with a name that caught immediate attention: Frank Black. That name, prosecutors argued, wasn't just a pseudonym, it was an alias, and the bottles weren't empty. Inside was a pink powder that later tested positive for ketamine and MDMA, powerful drugs commonly associated with sexual coercion, dissociation, and impaired memory. The alias Frank Black is believed to be a play on the name Frank White, the fictional drug kingpin persona used by Diddy's late friend, the notorious B.I.G. But this time, it wasn't a rap metaphor, it was real. Prosecutors argued that Frank Black was more than a tribute. It was a hidden identity used to obtain drugs without drawing attention, suggesting deliberate concealment. But that's not all agents found. They also uncovered a mini black duffel bag filled with unopened condom boxes, luxury lubricants, and multiple burner phones. Each item was cataloged and photographed, with timestamps matching the night of Diddy's arrest. For the jury, this evidence painted a stark contrast to the image of a grieving artist or misunderstood mogul. This was preparation, intention, a system. In a calculated move to undermine the defense's narrative, prosecutors reminded the jury that Diddy had been arrested just hours after Cassie's hotel assault video resurfaced online. The timing of the raid wasn't random. It was based on fears that Diddy might destroy or hide evidence. And now, with every item laid out in court, that concern seemed justified. To avoid repetition, the prosecution strategically pivoted and introduced witness testimony from the agents who served the arrest warrant. They testified about Diddy's demeanor during the raid, describing him as calm, collected, and cooperative, but notably unfazed. He made no immediate calls. He didn't demand lawyers. Instead, he sat silently, watching the agents work. That silence, prosecutors implied, spoke volumes. In a move that raised eyebrows, the defense attempted to downplay the findings. They argued that none of the items found in the room proved abuse or assault. The drugs, they claimed, could have been for personal use. The cash? Just pocket money for a wealthy man. The lighting? Harmless ambiance. But prosecutors pushed back hard, asking, if this was also normal, why the fake name? To keep the pace fresh, prosecutors introduced a short detour into Diddy's travel history. Using subpoenaed records, they showed that Diddy often stayed in different luxury hotels under alternate names, sometimes using variations of Frank, Love, or Black. This wasn't just a one-off. It was a pattern, and it raised a chilling question. Was this suite just one of many silent stages for the chaos Cassie had described? By the time the agent stepped down from the stand, the jury had heard about violence, sex trafficking claims, blackmail, and now, physical evidence suggesting that Diddy wasn't just accused. He may have been actively creating environments to carry out and conceal abuse. And for the viewers watching this unfold in real time, one thing was crystal clear. The image of Sean Combs as an untouchable icon was collapsing, one room and one receipt at a time. As the courtroom prepared to adjourn for the weekend, the prosecution had one final play. It wasn't a new witness, a shocking video, or forensic evidence. It was a series of personal text messages, intimate, emotional, and revealing, that pulled the jury deep into the aftermath of the Cassie and Diddy saga. These weren't messages from the peak of their relationship. They were from years later, long after the headlines had faded and the cameras had moved on. The text came from Diddy himself, sent well after their 2018 breakup. In them, he congratulated Cassie on her first pregnancy, referred to her as his ride or die, and reminisced about their time together. In one message, he even called her one of the greatest women in the world. The tone was affectionate, even vulnerable. But to the prosecution, they were something else entirely. A glimpse into a man still trying to maintain emotional control, even after their relationship had ended. Cassie took the stand one last time to explain what those messages meant to her. She admitted that at the time, they felt good to read. After years of trauma and manipulation, receiving kind words from the man who once controlled her every move triggered complex emotions. But she made it clear, those feelings were temporary. "I don't crave it anymore," she said, her voice steady. "Not like I used to." The prosecution followed up with a key question. Did she have any financial interest in the outcome of this trial? Without hesitation, Cassie responded, "Absolutely not." Her answer landed with weight. In a case packed with salacious claims and celebrity names, her motive had been questioned from the start. But her response was direct, powerful, and grounded in conviction. And then came the question, the one the defense had likely been waiting to float all week. If you hadn't been forced to participate in freak-offs, would you still have accepted the $30 million? Cassie didn't flinch. Her answer was just as clear. "I would give it back to get my agency back." It was a sentence that silenced the room, a reminder that this wasn't about money. It was about power, dignity, and freedom. As a factual backdrop, the court confirmed that Cassie had reached a $10 million settlement with the Intercontinental Hotel, where one of the most high-profile alleged assaults occurred. She also reportedly received additional civil suit payouts totaling around $30 million. But throughout the trial, she maintained that the emotional cost far outweighed any financial compensation. No amount of money could erase what she'd endured. To keep the momentum moving and avoid emotional fatigue, prosecutors pivoted briefly to Cassie's career. They highlighted how, despite her early promise in music and entertainment, her public output slowed significantly during her time with Diddy. When asked why, Cassie said the answer was simple. I didn't feel like I owned myself. She revealed that she had been controlled creatively, emotionally, and financially throughout the relationship. The defense tried to counter by showing texts where Cassie appeared affectionate or even flirty after their breakup. But the prosecution used that to reinforce their point. Abuse doesn't always end with a breakup. In many cases, the emotional entanglement lingers long after the physical separation. Cassie's willingness to admit her complicated feelings instead of denying them only made her testimony more human and more believable. As court wrapped for the weekend, the judge dismissed the jury with a nod to the gravity of what they'd heard. The messages may have been the final piece of evidence for the week, but their impact lingered. They weren't just texts, they were echoes of a power dynamic that had never truly ended. For the jury, and for the public, they raised one haunting question. If this is what he said when the cameras weren't rolling, what else haven't we seen? With new witnesses expected next week and public attention only growing, the trial is entering a new phase. But after Cassie's final words, one thing is undeniable. This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a fight for truth, identity, and justice. And for the first time in years, Cassie Ventura is finally telling her story on her own terms. Cassie's final words didn't just end her testimony, they ignited a cultural reckoning. After years of silence, manipulation, and trauma, she stood in federal court, not as a pop star's ex-girlfriend, but as a woman reclaiming her voice. And the moment she said, "I would give the money back just to get my agency back," it was clear. This wasn't about headlines. It was about humanity, about survival, about justice finally catching up to power. This trial has peeled back the glittering veneer of celebrity and revealed the brutal reality hiding beneath it. We've heard about freak-offs, secret recordings, controlled careers, and hotel raids that uncovered drugs, burner phones, and burner identities. We've seen a parade of witnesses, some once loyal insiders, step forward to expose what they saw behind the closed doors of Diddy's empire. Each testimony isn't just about Cassie. It's about an entire system built on silence and fueled by fear. But beyond the courtroom drama, this case is forcing society to ask deeper questions. How often do we look the other way when fame is involved? How many survivors never speak up because the price of truth feels too high? And how many more voices, like Cassie's, have been buried beneath NDAs, settlements, and carefully curated public images? As the trial continues, it's becoming painfully clear. This isn't just the fall of a man. It's the unraveling of a machine. Next week, more witnesses are expected to testify. New evidence could be introduced, and the pressure is mounting, not just on Diddy's legal team, but on an industry that enabled him for decades. What happens next could ripple far beyond this courtroom. It could reshape how we define accountability, consent, and power in an era where social capital often trumps moral responsibility. So now we turn it over to you. Is this the downfall of an untouchable mogul, or the beginning of a long overdue reckoning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Tap that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next chapter could be the one that changes everything.